informed there is a Santa
All right, everybody, welcome to the Acid for Squares podcast. I'm your host, Cody Blue.
And I'm Tanya Dahl, and today we have our amazing, beautiful friend, Madre Jaguar, on the show today.
Woo!
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. What an honor to be here.
The honor is ours, sister. And I'm going to give you a little introduction. I wrote some stuff down for those who do not know you. So, Madre Jaguar is a birth doula, oracle, and curandera, a skilled practitioner of many different healing modalities, including shamanism, Reiki, folk magic, herbalism, and tarot. But the path and archetype that might best possibly encapsulate Madre Jaguar is that of a planeswalker. So one who walks between worlds and interfaces with the divine through visions, prophetic dreams, visitations, and is a direct channel for the other side. We have had the honor and privilege of receiving healings from you many years ago. That's how we were first connected. Mm-hmm. Your practice is deeply rooted in indigenous wisdoms and traditions, yet you've grown up in the modern Western world. You even worked in Hollywood for many years. So what aspects of your ancestral heritage do you find resonates most powerfully with people in the West seeking healing today?
Well, just to clarify, I was born in California, but I grew up in Mexico, and my family's from El Salvador.
Oh.
And most of my adult life, I have lived in California or the United States. But the past 4 years, I was living in Mexico, in different areas of Mexico. And to answer your question, what resonates with people about my practice, I feel that, especially in this day and age, people are seeking for a connection to their own lineages and for a direct connection to spirit, which is something that we all have. And for me, I know now that I am a descendant of the Mayan, Pipil, Garifuna, and Nahuatl people because I started doing work around healing my ancestral lineages and reconnecting with my ancestors. And this was because as a child of immigrants who grew up in a foreign country, I didn't really have family members to share the stories and the wisdom with me. And even when I connected with some of those family members that are still alive, there was a big resistance around sharing the stories and the wisdom and the past. And so I had to start doing work on the spiritual realm. And that's where I started receiving information, and I started reweaving the threads and understanding where I came from and what started happening. And this is something that happens when we start doing work in the spirit world, is that it would translate to me receiving confirmation on the physical world. So after I started doing work on the spiritual realm and started having a direct connection with my ancestors and understanding that I can work with them, my father actually reached out and just confirmed everything that I had been receiving through my meditations or my journeys and my prayers.
Oh, how beautiful.
And thank you. And I feel that this is something that we all long for, belonging. We all want to know where we came from. We all need roots. But because of historical events that have happened and the modern world, right, there's been a big disconnection. However, we are now at a place in the timeline of humanity where we are desperately seeking to reweave those threads and to have that reconnection with the roots, right? And when you start working with the ancestors, when you start working with the roots, you are working with your own foundations.
Wow.
I hope that answers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it does beautifully.
Beautifully said. So I do want to touch upon a little bit so all of us, Cody and I come from the entertainment world here in Hollywood, and so did you. So could you explain a little bit about your transition from working in production into what you're now doing?
Sure. So I'm a storyteller, and the reason why I went to school to study video production was because I wanted to see the stories that I was seeing in my mind's eye on a screen. And so for 6 years, not counting the time that I spent in school, I was working in the industry. And my last job, I realized that my heart wasn't in it anymore. And I had this clarity that I did not want to be selling things to people. I wanted to help people. And understanding that the industry can be a very toxic place. Because I didn't know what else to do, I started praying about it. And the intention that I was holding was that I want to help people. And through prayer and meditation, I started receiving a lot of synchronicity and signs, the so-called angel numbers, where we start seeing repeating numbers, patterns, and I just started following the energy trails, and they led me to different teachers and modalities that are now part of my practice. And the first one was Reiki, which is I teach Reiki because it was such a powerful and transformational tool for me to help me understand that I was very sensitive to energy, that I was perceiving energy, but also to understand that I didn't have to take on all of it, right? I didn't have to feel overwhelmed, that I could create energetic boundaries so that I could navigate this reality in a way that felt a lot more balanced for me. So I left the production industry and I have never gone back. But, I feel like my story is a good example of it's possible to change. It's possible. And every day is an opportunity for change, right? And if your heart's not in it anymore, then are you being honest about the work that you're doing? If it's not bringing you joy, if you're waking up in the morning and you're already dreading going to do that, then is it really for your benefit? Is it really for the highest benefit of everyone?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we couldn't agree more just in terms of the awakening of the realization of the toxicity of the culture of Hollywood, and also that the media we've been participating in is not necessarily what's best for the people watching it, and that a higher intention of healing or helping or being in service of our brothers and sisters around the world and whatever that means, your community. It might not be the most direct path of working in the Hollywood machine, which is very much the advent of this company and this show. One of the things that's really interesting is for us, Reiki was also one of the first modalities. We're both trained Reiki practitioners. That was a big part of at least personally my initiation into this world. I mean, it started with meditation and then Reiki. That was a game changer.
But Cody's like you, where he's super sensitive to energy. He's like incredible. He can really perceive a lot. So Reiki was huge for you.
I had to stop. I was doing it for years and it became my spiritual practice. It was a great honor, and I would do it after work. So I finished my day, whether it was production was too busy of a day to do it, but if I was writing at the end of the day, I would do it. I've never took money for it. It felt like it was a way of giving back. But eventually I would, there's a lot, I was novice at a lot of it and I was taking on a lot of energy. And my family literally had to be like, you have to stop. I wasn't protecting myself the right way. There was a lot I had to learn, but instead of going into my experience with Reiki, I would love if you could speak a little bit to the practice of what's called quote unquote Reiki, because that's just a brand of energy healing, and energy healing is a birthright that we all have. I mean, we all unconsciously do it. If we have anxiety, you put your hand over your heart. If your friend or family member's suffering, you put their hand on their back. You have a headache, you throw your hand on your head. Could you speak to energy medicine? Because I think that's a very good baseline tool for people who are interested in self-healing and self-transformation on a spiritual and energetic level.
So Reiki is a Japanese healing modality that was given to us by Mikao Usui, who was a Japanese minister. And it works based on channeling energy and laying on hands on different parts of the body. When you channel Reiki, Reiki is a word that translates to universal life force energy. And so when you're channeling Reiki, you're not using your own life force energy. You're simply a channel for the energy to flow through you. And then the recipient is the one who's actually pulling as much energy as they need. This energy is an intelligent energy that knows what to do, it knows where to go, and we don't need to manipulate it. We're simply allowing for the energy to flow through us. And for us as humans, it's something that it's our sixth sense, right? It's second nature, but we have grown up within a culture where we have been told that energy, spirit, anything that is not, that we're not able to perceive with our other five senses is not real, right? But when you speak to a child, and this has happened to me where I don't have to teach children about energy healing, they already know. And I specifically remember asking a child once, what is your superpower? And this child goes, I can take energy from the sky, bring it down to the earth, and help people.
Whoa.
Right? That child already knew. Within this modality, we call it Reiki. But the more, in many years of practicing, I have come to understand that this energy is something that is universal to many cultures. And in many cultures, laying on hands and channeling this energy is called different things. But again, it's this sixth sense that we all have, our intuition, our ability to perceive energy. And that if we weren't maybe so inundated by all of these information and stimuli, then we would still be very much using that sense. It was after the industrial age that we kind of started disconnecting from nature and our own nature, right?
Absolutely. There's something interesting. You mentioned that Reiki is almost one brand of energy healing, and that across all cultures they have their version of energy medicine, and it's very similar, if not the same, in the technique and practice. You have a very direct lineage, but you also practice many different lineages. You are a student of spiritual teachings and medicine. What do you find are universal connections and, things that repeat across cultures when it comes to healing and spiritual medicine? Are there repeating ideas or techniques?
Love. This energy, which we can call Reiki, or we can call Orenda, or we can call tonal, depending on where you are. It's love. It is what makes up the universe. It's what's holding everything together. And we are love made visible, right? I studied specifically within lineages in Mexico, Central and South America, because this is where I'm from. And on my path, this is where spirit has guided me to receive teachings. But within these indigenous traditions, there is the belief that everything has a soul, everything has an essence, everything has energy, right? And so we could be working with that universal life force energy, aka love, but we can also connect with the energy of everything around us, the mountains, the trees, the river, the stones, the birds, the animals. And we can receive wisdom and medicine from all of these elements. So if we think about it, everything that we need in order to heal is already just at the reach of our hands.
Right.
You were speaking earlier about when you started working with energy medicine, that you had to learn how to protect your energy. And I know a lot of people deal with this of feeling like they're taking on other people's energy or being pulled or they're drained or something like that. Could you speak to maybe some ways that people can protect their energy?
Boundaries are very important, right? And sometimes I don't like to call it, I need to protect myself, because if I say that, then I'm affirming that there's something out there that's going to harm me. And so I think of this more as energetic boundaries. And boundaries are a way for us to connect from a loving place without taking on each other's burdens, right? And as people that are sensitive to energy, empaths, healing practitioners, it's very important for us to have good boundaries, good energetic boundaries, and to learn when to say no, right? When I was younger, I had a lot of very interesting experiences. For example, I remember one time I was a teenager, I was sitting in front of a fast food restaurant waiting for the bus. And this woman I had never met before come and sat very close to me and just started venting and telling me her whole life story. And then when she was done, she was like, "Thank you," and left. And I remember just feeling really like sad and heavy. And then for
Story
the
of my
rest of the
life.
day, just
Been
like
there.
feeling that. And at the time, I didn't understand that, something about my presence or my energy at that moment felt safe and comfortable for that person. And so she came and she literally dumped all of the heaviness that she was carrying with her. And then she felt great, but I was not feeling great afterwards. And so that is why it's important to be discerning, right? We don't have to take on anybody's burdens. We can hold space for someone, but if I'm in a place where I'm not prepared to hold that space for you, it's just gonna drain me, right? Energetic boundaries are also important when we're doing any type of ritual, any type of ceremonial work, anything really, because I always tell my students, when we create energetic boundaries, it's like we're affirming that not just anyone is allowed in the party, right? When I create energetic boundaries, I make sure to affirm only that which is love, only that which is light can enter the space and exist, and everything else is returned back to source, right? It's a way to create a safe space for you to open portals, for you to receive healing energy, for you to share healing energy, for you to make your prayers and your prayers to be lifted up to spirit.
So when you're doing the boundaries, mostly it's through words, right? The things that you're saying.
Words carry vibration, right? It's all about energy. So I'm using my words as a way to shift energy, but if I'm by myself, I might not speak those words out loud. It's more about my intention. And the best way in which you can create an energetic boundary is you call in the energy of love, right? You can, and you affirm only love can enter the space. And then there are other elements that you can use because as humans, we are creatures of ritual. We need tangible things to convince the ego of something that we understand on a soul level. So, if you think of the energy of love, what is an object that for you represents unconditional, pure love? I'm going to say rose right now because for me, that's an archetype that represents that energy. So I might invite the energy of rose into the space. I might visualize a giant rose covering the entire room, or I might actually take rose petals, physical rose petals, and sprinkle them around my space.
This is fascinating because, and I mentioned it before, but essentially when I was in the early days of me doing healing work, there were two major mistakes I made. There was many. One was boundaries. Two, I came from a place of a scientific materialist perspective. So when I first got into this work, I was very nervous to take money for it because from an unconscious, ignorant place, I was perceiving people as taking money as I don't know, like it was like not a right thing to do. But when I would be doing healings on people for free, there was no like reciprocity or equal exchange, and it created some sort of strange boundary where because they weren't giving anything for it, they were just taking. It was draining me. I also was thinking that I was doing the energy healing, and my ego thinking that was making me literally sick. I would take it on as opposed to being like a conduit for the energy or channel. So everything you're saying is like really ringing true for me. I literally had to stop doing that work because I was not, I had not got these things fixed. I think I'm better, but hearing you say all this right now is like, I'm like, oh boy, okay, boundaries.
And something that I can tell you as well is that, we are not saviors for people because many times as healing practitioners, we have that, we want to help, right? To the point where maybe we're like trying to save people. And even the term healer for me is, sometimes I'm uncomfortable calling myself that, right? I don't call myself a healer. I am not the one that heals people. People heal themselves. What I do is I create a safe and loving and cozy container for you to bring down your barriers and for you to receive. And you're receiving not from me, but you're receiving from source. You're receiving from your own healed ancestors, from your spirit team, and then from the elements that that we bring into the space for the practice, right? But the moment that the session ends and you go home, it is up to you, the recipient, to integrate all of the messages that came through the session, or to integrate the energy that you receive during the session. So, for example, I always tell people after the session, engage in activities that are going to be healing, loving, and nurturing. Because if you come to me and we do a healing session where we cleanse everything, we release, we cut cords, we bring everything back into balance, but then you go straight to the dive bar and then you drink, 20 shots of tequila, then all of the work that we just did, was for nothing. Right. And we're not perfect. We're humans. But it is important for us to have practices to help us integrate the messages, the wisdom, the medicine, and the healing energy that we receive, whether during a session with a practitioner or during our own connection with our spirit team and with Source.
That's so profound. And I love that you just said that about, even going by the title of healer. So I in an ayahuasca ceremony in Costa Rica, I had to take a vow to stop doing Reiki. It was the medicine made me. And she said, I'll never forget these words, that she presented to me that I was hurting them. She said, you're pandering to the illusion that an external force will help them instead of inspiring them to save themselves. And it showed me this vision of my hands extended and told me to put my hands together like this and just rise. And I stopped doing Reiki after that. And also in that ceremony, it was communicated that by even going by the language of a healer, I was creating a distortion in the field of a hierarchy as opposed to a unification of equality, and a reflection, being a mirror to show them their own ability to heal themselves. And this was many years ago, 2018. So I have, everything you said could not ring more true. And I think people that are on this path, it's really important for them to hear these things about not pedestalizing yourself and remembering that we're all in service, and however that expresses itself. So one of the questions I would like to ask beyond Reiki is, some people on this path, it's sickness and their own healing that catapults them on the path. Some people have an experience or a phenomenon or a connection or a dream that catalyzes them on their path. And other people start practicing, dabbling, and experimenting, and that initiates a contact with spirit. So the chicken or the egg here, which one is it for you when it comes to your first encounter with spirit? Was this something passed down to you, or is this something that came to you?
It's a little bit of all of the above, right? So I was always that strange child that would tell their classmates, flowers have messages for us. And as a child, I was highly sensitive. I remember going out to restaurants with my family and feeling like I could hear everyone's conversations, right? Whoa. And having a group of friends that I perceived to live on the ceiling, and they were all from different cultures, different ages, and they were always watching me, and we were always speaking. And about 7 years old, I have a conversation with them, and I tell them, you have to go away because I have been told by the adults in my life that you're not real. Aww. And I don't feel comfortable with you watching me all the time, right? And so at that moment, I closed the door. Fast forward to when I'm 19, going to art school to study video production, I am placed in student housing. And this building, it is said that it used to be an insane asylum, and then they turned it into an apartment building. And the energy there was very interesting. So I started having night visitations that were not very pleasant. But at the same time, my roommate at the time gifted me my first tarot deck. And so when I received this tarot deck, then I start holding the intention of, I want to be able to develop my intuition, and I want to be able to have help. And so then began the process of opening up that doorway back to my spirit team. And I remember feeling frustrated because I wanted to see spirit. I wanted to have the visions. I wanted to receive the messages, right? But the way that it works is that the door doorways will start opening up very gently and very slowly at times, right? And the reason for this, I understand now, is that because if it were to open fully and completely all at once, it would be overwhelming
Yeah.
to the point where maybe we could go out of our minds.
Yeah,
right?
it's traumatizing. It can be traumatizing too.
And so I persisted. So I kept praying, I kept having conversations. And so during the early parts of my 20s, I feel like I would come back to the path and then drift away, come back, drift away. And, you know, by the time I'm 30, I go through a very heartbreaking experience in my life where I basically experienced death and a breakup within the same week.
Wow.
And I was very sad, very depressed, to the point where I felt, you know, if I stay here doing the same thing, I'm going to die. And so decided to go on a trip, and I booked a one-way ticket to New York because when I was looking at the return flights, my heart just dropped to my stomach and I knew I'm not coming back. And so I booked a one-way ticket and I go to New York for a year, and believe it or not, that's where my first initiation happened, right? Where for the first time I found community that was in the same frequency. And within this community, people started asking me to teach them and to share what I knew. And after going through that cycle of death, Madre Jaguar was born. And I made that commitment to my path back in 2012, which was a portal year. A lot of things shifted for a lot of us in 2012. Mm-hmm. That was the year that I made the commitment to, this is the path that I want to walk. This is how I want to show up in the world. And here I am 12 years later. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I've been doing this for 12 years, which in the scheme of things, it's like, it's not a very long amount of time. But if I think about it, my whole life, I have been that weird kid that talked to plants and was highly sensitive. Last night I was remembering that one of the first types of divination that I used to practice as a kid was just gazing into a candle and then reading the candle wax and seeing the shapes. And as children, we know why we came here. We understand where we come from. And, you know, as adults, especially adults that are watching or listening right now that have little ones, our job is simply to hold that container so that your child can bloom into their own being.
Wow, yeah. Tanya, didn't you have a similar upbringing? And by the way, I just want to say this is so interesting because she's talking about how she shut the door when she was 7.
I know, that's what I was going to say. So I've been able to see spirits since I was a kid. And at the age of 19, I was going to college and I was in a psychiatry class or a psychology class. And they had us do speeches. And for some reason, I changed my speech at the last minute to auras because I've been able to see auras. I can literally take your body and move it to the side and see a map of you. And so I'm up there talking. I'm like, you know, when you're sitting in class and everybody's heads are glowing, everyone's looking at me like, what the fuck? I'm like, okay, put your fingers together like this. I'm concentrate in the center and pull them apart. I'm like, do you see the bands of light? Everybody's just going like this, going, yep. What the hell's wrong? Going? I'm like, that's an aura, like a crazy person. And I walk outside I didn't know what to do because nobody would talk to me. This one guy, Kalai, came up to me and he goes, you and I are going to be friends. And I was like, oh, thank God. But I shut the door that day. Yeah. And from that moment, my visitations and stuff, my sightings just slowly stopped. And then it really became like a place of fear when something would happen. But I shut the door. I shut off being able to see auras or anything like that. And so what you're saying is really, really interesting. The idea of once I did invite it back in, it did take a little while for it to open back up fully, and it's still opening back up. And I don't know, it was just really beautiful hearing you say that. So thank you for sharing that because that means a lot to me.
Yeah, can you two speak actually to this for a second? Because so I think this is a beautiful illustration of how free will plays a part when it comes to interacting with spirit. and there is a law of free will, and that we have to ask to receive. And I think as to women, at least in my experience, I find that women are far more sensitive and connected to the spirit realm. I find that for myself and for other men I know that are on this path, you really have to do a lot more work to kind of get at the level of the women when it comes to the connectivity. And like, I was afraid and would see things in the dark as a kid, but never quite like what you're describing. Can you explain how free will plays a part into inviting the spiritual part of life into one's existence?
Yes. So as humans, we have free will, and that means that spirit can't intervene unless it's a life or death situation, right? And so, for example, me, I perceive spirit, I speak with spirit, I receive messages from spirit. And this is where boundaries come in again, right? If I'm in the middle of the night sleeping and I get woken up by spirit, I don't get scared anymore. I get upset because that's my time to rest. And so I will say, not right now. This is my time and my space. You can come back later. If it's someone that I want to talk to, right? If it's something that it's not of the light, of course, I'm not going to allow it to be in there. And, I thank you so much, Tanya, for sharing your story, because I can relate to that. And as a child, like, I had these experiences that I thought everyone was perceiving reality in the same way. And then when I would open up about it, I would be told that I was making it up. And so as a way for us to survive, it's a survival mechanism, we chose to close that door, right? Because we wanted to belong, we wanted to fit in. And many times I think about, wow, who would I be if as a child this would have been encouraged and nurtured? Where would I be? But I also understand that part of my path was to go through that experience, and I connect with a lot of people that have gone through similar experiences. And we also have that free will to choose. I want to connect to my intuitive gifts. No, it's not something that is forced upon you, or even the path, right? They say that this path chooses you. And many times I said no. And so I would drift away from the path, but then spirit would very gently give me that choice to come back to the path. And for me, it got to the point where, if I try to walk a different path that is not me, that it's not mine, I don't have a really good time.
Yeah.
So now I choose to be present and to show up and to walk this path and to love this path because it's mine. It's my journey, my experience, right?
Can you speak to, so a lot of people have experiences with spirits or seeing them or hearing them or whatever, and it's scary. It's been scary for me. Like my entire life, I lived in like a state of fear. Is there a way that I don't even know if you actually came from a place of fear, but can you speak to how someone could overcome the fear of being able to interact with spirit?
Set boundaries. And if you are wanting to create space to be in communion, for example, with your spirit team, which, we all have a spirit team of energy beings that walk with us. Our ancestors, spirit guides, guardian angels. And I would suggest start talking to them. Let them know about your intention of opening up to your psychic gifts and abilities. And ask them to speak to you in a way that is very easy and clear to understand. And tell them, I don't want to see spooky things. I told them that. I have never, to this day, I have never seen something scary. And I asked for that specifically because when I was starting to open up to my gifts, I said, I don't want to see scary things. I don't want to see bloody, disembodied beings. No. And so they honor that, right? And I always ask to work with the light, to work with beings of love. And that's who I work with. That's who I allow into my space. And, part of the job of your spirit team is to be a buffer, to be your guardians, to be your protectors. And so work with them Even if you don't know who they are, they know you. And all you have to do is just hold that intention of, I want to start communicating with you. Can you show me who you are? Can you show me in which ways you are communicating with me? Can you do it in a very loving and gentle way? Can you do it in a way that is very easy for me to understand? Can you do it when in the dream time? And the dream time is a great time for us to commune with spirit, because then the ego is turned off and our barriers are down. And so that's why many people will report having these experiences when they were dreaming. And it, you know, for example, with people that have moved on, that have left their physical body, there are many, many stories of family members that will report that their loved one, who is no longer in the physical body, came to visit them in the dream time, and they were happy and they looked good and they were radiant, and it made them feel good to see them that way. And it's because in the dream time, we don't have the same resistance that we have when we are awake. And so you can ask them to work with you in the dream time.
This is profound and very important, because we're talking about the nuances of how individuals can begin to have a relationship, what we are calling and defining as spirit. And when you speak of a spirit team, it can sound outlandish or left of center, but it really is as it is, and we really don't have the language to properly explain it. We've poured through NDE experiences, near-death experiences, and there are thousands and thousands of documented NDE experience, and a common thread is an ancestor being them, to meet them, to explain what has happened to them, and essentially say, you can either come to the afterlife or you can continue in this current life, but this is what you're going to go through and this is what you're here to learn, et cetera, et cetera. So it is, as far as we're concerned, fact that there is a spirit team. When we do ceremonies, for me, when I step into medicine ceremonies, often as if they are entering the room. They're usually dressed in white, and they will sit around me in a circle. There's typically like 4 to 6. I cannot see their faces, but I see them enter with my eyes closed and sit around me until we're a circle, preparing for it to begin, to be with me. So could you elaborate a little bit of the why of a spirit team, the function of a spirit team, that on the other side, they have interest in helping us, and why there is an interest? Why is there a seemingly an occupation of help in our ancestry that we may call angels or archangels or guides or so on and so forth? Can you speak to this at all?
I feel like that's a really deep question.
It's a lot.
And, I can't tell you the exact answer, but I can share what I feel in my heart of why I have a spirit team, or why we have a spirit team, right? It's because we are loved. We are, we come into this planet, and we come into this planet with this wound of separation, believing that we're separate from the all, right? And our spirit team, which consists of, the closest one to us are our ancestors, right?
Yeah.
And if we think about it, for someone that maybe is not open to this, or it just sounds very outlandish, if you think about it, your ancestors' wisdom, information, DNA is literally flowing through your veins. I remember when my grandmother passed away, I looked at myself in the mirror, and for the first time, I noticed her features in my face and understanding, she's here. I am the continuation of her love, right? And so the closest ones to us are our ancestors, and they have an investment in us because we're their family. We're their loved ones. They prayed for us. They dreamt us into being. And then we have our spirit guides. Our spirit guides are beings that have had the human experience, who are no longer in a human body. And they're usually teachers that come into our life at different moments to share wisdom and guidance with us. So for example, when you learn how to practice Reiki, you probably had 1 or 2 spirit guides that came in at that moment to support you with your practice. We can also call on spirit guides to come and support us with different things or situations in our lives that we're wanting to learn or overcome. To track back a little bit, ancestors are really great in supporting us with anything that has to do with being human, because they have been human. They know what it's like to try to find a job. They know what it's like to have troubles in your relationship. So you call on your healed ancestors when you need support in navigating the human experience. Your spirit guides are there to support you, sharing teachings and wisdom. So, for example, and this can be really silly, but something so practical as I'm learning how to drive a car. Can I please receive a spirit guide that was really good at driving, you know? And you might get a teacher that, I don't know, was a truck driver. And he comes, and then you start receiving wisdom from them. And then we have our angels, which, you know, throughout different cultures, we see that they are angelic beings or angels or angel-like beings, right? And so these are beings of a higher vibration who have never been human, who are the closest to source. And they are here to support us and guide us throughout our lifetimes. And this is when we hear those stories about people that, for example, got in an accident and someone came out of nowhere and they lifted up the car and pulled them away. And then when they turn around, this person had disappeared and they never heard from them again.
Yeah.
Or just someone that walked into your life and share a piece of advice with you that was pivotal for you at that moment, and then you never knew who that person was or where they came from and never heard from them again, right?
Wow, that's beautiful. And I just want to say that I think something that's so interesting about the difficulty people have when understanding what you're defining as the spirit team is that from their higher consciousness and perspective, they view us as one. We're family beyond our concept of family. Family is the closest thing we can see from a human, consciousness of that oneness. You know, our health and happiness is their health and happiness. I think something I would like to know from your perspective, being a planeswalker, is what do you think this place is? Because help implies difficulty. Help implies that the other side is well aware that this is difficult and there's a lot of suffering that comes with this plane of existence, Earth School, whatever you want to call it. What do you feel like this place is and the purpose of this existence?
I think of it as a school. We come here because our soul wants to learn and evolve, right? And it is a plane of duality where we experience that separation from the oneness, where there can be a lot of pain and suffering, but there's also so much beauty, right? And I'm sure throughout your life, you've had those moments where you're like, well, if reincarnation is true, I never want to come back because it's so hard. But then something beautiful happens and you're like, actually, I really love this. And, you know, a few years ago, I used to joke with my friends that I didn't want to come here. I was like, no, I don't want to go back. But then I was reminded all my friends are going to be there. And then I was like, okay, then I'll go back.
Wow.
And
cute.
I love that.
And
It makes sense. I would go to that.
yeah, and we're all here, and we're all at different stages in our soul's evolution. But all of us that are here, it is said that all of us have chosen to be here. So even right now, with everything that's happening in the world, we chose to be here at this moment. And I remember as a child, I just had this sense of I had a very important reason to be here. Even if as a child I couldn't logically explain it, I just had this feeling of I have to be here. I have to be here. And during those moments where I'm like, oh my God, it's so heavy, I remind myself, no, I chose to be here. And for me, it's also about being curious, right? When it gets really dark, really heavy, well, what else can happen now? How can things get better? What is on the other side of this, this dark, long tunnel? Light.
It's beautiful.
Well said.
So I would love to have you dive in a little bit into the lineages and practices that you've been working with.
So I have been studying in Mexico with traditional healers or traditional teachers. And what my teacher calls it is ancestral medicine, and it's just how do I explain it? It's because I grew up in Mexico. I'm very connected to the Mexica lineage, but because my family's from El Salvador, I'm also connected to the Mayan lineage, and so I have been learning with different teachers under the Mexican and Mayan tradition, which sometimes can be very similar, but for them, you know, we work with the elements. So we work with fire, we work with water. We understand that these elements are sacred, that thanks to them is that we are alive here as humans, you know. Down in Mexico in ceremonies, every time water comes in, we say, thank you, sacred water. With you, everything is possible. Without you, nothing is possible. And we think of fire as grandfather, right? It is a gentle, loving grandfather that will share wisdom with you. I have teachers that tell me, you know, when I ask, what do you do with everything that's happening in the world and all the pain and all the heaviness and all the suffering? How do you know what action to take? And my teacher has said to me, I sit with the fire. And what the fire tells me is to take care of what's happening here in my own land so that that will ripple out. The fire tells me to tend to my family and be present with my family so that will ripple out to my community. Part of these practices is really about having a relationship with these energies, with these elements. We call them essences, right? They are essences that are always around us. And it's about being in right relationship with them. And it's not about just going to ask and receive and to take, right? There has to be reciprocity. So if I work with fire, I have to feed that fire. I have to tend to that fire. And I sit there and I listen to that fire. That fire will share with me the wisdom and the guidance that I need at that moment. If I go sit with the water, I have to bless the water. People have forgotten to bless the waters, right? Water is a conduit. Everything we pour into it, everything we speak by the water, everything we sing by the water, that water will hold it. And that water travels all over the world, right? And I feel like at the core of these teachings, again, love, being in right relationship, having reciprocity, and listening.
Wow.
That's actually something I do with my plants when I water them. Whatever the water jug that I take it, I put it in the sun. I say, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you, I love you, I love you. And then I water all my plants because I'm trying to put, like, because I heard that, you know, water holds energy and your words change the vibration of it. So I'm trying to give that back to the plants because I do. I love them and I'm glad that they're there in our home.
This is so beautiful to hear
Yeah,
the two of you talk about this, because something that you're talking about and which is universal from our teachers that comes through is that we're very interested in the source of illness. And it tends to come back to this illusion of separation, that we are disconnected fundamentally from source. And love is this word that is thrown around so much, sometimes it can lose meaning, and we often define it as the word that means connection. Love is the feeling of connection. And now what you're talking about is the practice of reconnecting to the spirit that is in all things and how we do that. And something just clicked listening to you speak around the reciprocal nature of equal exchange, that connection is a give and take. And this comes back to boundaries. This comes back to the very beginning of your teaching in the beginning of this, is how we connect in harmony, in divine order, whatever we want to call it, with spirit that's all around us through the elements and giving back. I mean, to define blessing as it's not like some holier than thou thing I'm blessing, it's no, I'm giving back to these elements, to these essences.
Yeah,
That's truly beautiful.
Simply being aware that we are alive because we're being supported by these elements and these beings, you know, plants. My grandmother, she taught me how to sing to plants so that they would be happy and they would grow. And when we talk, you know, just weaving back to what you said about what is the root cause of illness in the world, I truly believe that it's because we are out of balance, meaning we are not in tune with our own nature. We have forgotten that we are nature, right? When you start connecting with nature and, talking to plants, sitting under a tree, going for a hike, you start to observe the nature around you. You start to understand that nature goes through her seasons and her cycles. And in the same way as humans, we go through our seasons and our cycles. We should be building in a way that we're building with nature, not against nature, right? So you go to a field and you want to build a house there, you have to observe what's happening in that field. What trees are there, where the water is, what rocks are there. How can you work with all of these elements to build in a way that there is balance and reciprocity, and you're just not cutting down trees and cutting off the stream, which is, we are in the city of Los Angeles. And for a very long time, I struggled living here and I was always running away. And I left. I left many times, but I always come back. And the older that I get, the more that I understand that beyond the concrete and the buildings, nature is very much alive and present here, and that we need more people that are those bridges to help create and build in a way that we are in balance with everything that is here. The whole reason why there is a city here is because of the LA River, right? Which that is not her name. She has a name, but if it wasn't for that river, people would not have settled here. When you walk by that river, you start to observe that nature is very much alive. There are birds, there are ducks, there are plants, there are native plants that are growing here. There's medicine. When you walk by the river, for example, I hear the whispers of the people that were settled here before the concrete. And they share their ways, they share wisdom. They remind me that this river is very much alive and well. And, it could be very easy for me to go sit by the LA River and be very sad because it's so polluted. Or I could continue blessing those waters and giving thanks to those waters because in spite of that pollution, she continues to flow and she continues to be a source of life for so many beings.
Wow.
And as humans, we literally just need to go sit by the river. Like, how many people do you know in the city that go and sit by that river?
It's fascinating. It's that simple. And we were talking about this last night, that we're in this time where we're trapped in this war of narrative, where we often say that we're post-truth, but really we're post-facts, because language, there's always going to be a discrepancy when we're trying to discuss things. But if we just stop and be with each other and be by the river, as you're saying, our problems are very different. They're more on the level of just survival and being, and not the stories we've told ourselves. And that would take us to sort of our culmination of like the question we'd like to ask. Many different people, they talk of the prophecy of the eagle and the condor. In many ways, we are living through that prophecy.
So I'll just say that yes, eagle, condor, but also quetzal.
Quetzal?
Which is Central America.
Yeah, Central America.
Yeah, we have our bird, the quetzal.
Quetzal.
And so these birds, they're all about having a higher perspective. And the eagle and the condor represent the teachings from the north and the south coming together. And that is exactly what's happening right now. We see that all of these teachings and wisdom from North and South and also Central America, they are traveling all around the globe with this message of unity and connection.
Wow. I love putting it into a trinity because it does seem like we're moving beyond duality and sort of these binary understanding of the world. Is there anything you'd like to say that for the medicine for our people right now as we face war and at times of great, cultural collapse in many old monolithic institutions that have not been working crumble? Can you speak to anything about the direction and the medicine we need as we birth a new world out of the ashes of the old?
One of the first messages that I received when I started opening the door was govern yourself. Govern yourself. Have sovereignty over yourself, right? Know who you are. Know why you chose to be here on this planet and what your sacred service is to this planet and to the all. And move from this place of understanding who you are and what you came here to do. And spend time in nature. Go outside more. Technology is not a bad thing. Technology also comes from nature, but technology should be and must be supporting the processes of nature. But it's as simple as we're so used to having this little square in our hands telling us what to do and where to go, right? When we go to a new address, the first thing we do is we put it on the phone. And then the phone is telling us, you go right, you go left, you go right, move forward. Before technology, we were getting lost. We were wandering. And in that getting lost and that wandering, you would find the magic. And so, again, technology is not a bad thing. It's how we're using that technology, what relationship we have to this technology. The same, just to weave it back to the industry, right? We know that the industry is a very toxic place, but the main intention for this industry to be created was because people wanted to see their stories that were in their mind's eyes projected onto the screen, and they wanted to share those stories with everybody, right? And so at this moment, what are the kind of stories that we need? We need stories of hope. We need stories that uplift us. We need stories that remind us that we are nature. And you are doing it. You're an example of you created a platform using the tools that you acquired to have a space for people to have these conversations where we can talk about the things that when we were children, we thought everybody was talking about and understood, and then turns out not so much. And remember that things are also shifting. I remember when I started working with crystals, no one had crystals. And I remember the first time I met someone who carried crystals in their pockets, it was like instant connection, best friends. And now almost everybody carries at least a little quartz crystal with them or are familiar with crystals, right? And so things are shifting and changing. And remember that we live in a plane of duality. Yes, there is pain, there is suffering, there are terrible things that are happening. And so we must take action, right? But we must take this action from a place of love and compassion and kindness, right? I always talk about the fire as, that passion that we have in our hearts. That's the fire. If I sit with that fire and I listen to it and I know what to feed it and I keep it contained, that fire has the ability to bring bright light, to gather people, to magnetize people, to create community. If I let that fire go out of control, it can burn everything. And so what is that relationship that you have to your own fire right now? How are you holding that fire to create more light, to illuminate that darkness? Because there's always going to be darkness. But light will always conquer, right? And right now we're at a place where we need light bearers. We need more people turning on that light. And that just means you just have to show up in the world as the person that you are. You are the light. The more that we're doing that, we allow for others to do the same thing. So, just me coming here, sharing my story, this is my way of letting you know that wherever you are on your journey, whatever you're doing, if you're not happy, that unhappiness is just letting you know that something needs to shift. And that understanding, that clarity, it's not going to come from outside yourself. It's going to come from your heart. So create some space. If you need perspective, go hike a mountain. Go sit on top of a mountain. You'll have a higher, you're literally will have a higher perspective. If you're feeling stagnant, go sit by a river and watch the way in which the river flows. If you're feeling ungrounded, if you're feeling afraid, go sit with a tree and let that tree hold you. Everything that we need is here, and we don't need a lot. We have been made to believe that we need a lot. We don't need a lot. Keep it simple. Go back to nature. Go play outside. It's wild to me that children, this new generation, most of them, like I have seen babies holding screens, iPads.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember we used to go outside and play. Like we would be out there until the sun went down and then our moms would call us back in. But I remember as a child, like my first teachers were like watching the tadpoles in the creek and like playing with the flowers, pulling flowers and telling people flowers have messages for us. And they do.
I would like to add to what you said so beautifully. It was beautiful. Ask for help. Ask for help. If there's one thesis and theme to everything that you're teaching and sharing here, and Tanya, you constantly preach this, ask for help. What Madre Jaguar's here sharing is that it's that simple. We're talking about free will mechanism. Ask for help spiritually. You don't have to be religious to pray, to call upon your ancestors. People misunderstand ghosts. It's just when they cross over our loved ones, when they have loved ones still here, they want to make sure that they're supported on their journey. They don't want to just completely move on. They want to help. But we got to ask, and ask for help. That goes for everyone around you, your family, your friends, nature. Thank you. Thank you for everything you just said. And
That was beautiful. Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you. And the help is there when we ask. It shows up. And I also want to say, if you're afraid, get curious. If something scares you, get curious.
Ooh, yeah.
Curiosity is really good medicine for these times.
Yeah. If you fear something, run in that direction.
Yes.
That's how you know. There's an old Campbellian saying, as we know, we're all storytellers, and in the cave of fears lies the treasure you seek. And those are words to live by.
Absolutely. Caves are portals to the underworld.
That's right.
Where Mama Earth is, and our ancestors and all the good stuff. Even the underworld. We're afraid of the underworld, and yet we go through the underworld so many times throughout our lives.
That's right.
Jaguar, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your medicine with all of us.
Rad.
And yeah, we just absolutely adore you. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, you have a space here whenever you want to let your voice be heard.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you for the work that you're doing and for the changes you've made that brought us all here to this moment.
Yeah, same.
Thank you.
All ships rise together. Yeah.
Thank you. This is the Ask for Squares podcast. Like, share, subscribe. You know what to do. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Peace be
Bye.
on. Thank you.